Hello everyone and welcome to Crafting with Delonda. It's me again, Delonda, and thank you so much for joining me today. In today's tutorial, I am using my Cricut Explore Air 2 and I am going to demonstrate how to make an interchangeable wood sign for the porch. My sign says welcome and I'm going to demonstrate how to use the print then cut method to make the sign interchangeable. If you find this tutorial helpful, please remember to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell for notifications because I do upload new content every single week. Now, without further ado, let's look at all of the materials and dive right in to Cricut Design Space. This project actually has a lot of materials, and believe it or not, every single thing that you see here was used. I used my Cricut Explore Air 2 to cut out the vinyl. I'm using permanent vinyl, the 405 brand from Hobby Lobby. The wood was purchased from Home Depot. This is 6 feet, it's a 6-foot board. The sticker paper that I'm using is Ava vinyl sticker paper. I'll use a scraper. These are Velcro dots that I purchased from Hobby Lobby. My son used foam brushes to paint the board and to apply the polyacrylic. I'll use Maker's Magic to stick the wood down to the board. These wood circles were purchased from Hobby Lobby. They are 6.5 inches. Okay. This is the sanding block that we use. My son uses to sand the wood down before painting it. I'll use two 12 by 24 Cricut standard grip mats. I'm not sure if I've already said this, but the StarCraft white chalk and mineral paint. And then I'm using polyacrylic to seal the wood before the vinyl is applied. I think that's about everything, with the exception of the clear Oracal that I'll put on top of the sticker paper, but I'll show you that once I get started with this process. Now, without further ado, let's go into Cricut Design Space. Before we go into Cricut Design Space, let me just show you what I did to get the wood. We stopped by Home Depot and I wanted to get wood that I would not have to get cut. And I ultimately went with this wood right here. I'll leave the SKU below in the description in case you want to get one at the same size as this one. After grabbing the wood, I had my son get set up outside. He started by sanding the wood and just kind of smoothing it out. And then when he was finished with that, he moved on to painting both sides of the wood. He used the StarCraft chalk paint, and once it dried, he applied a second coat. And once that was dry, we brought the wood inside. I am in Cricut Design Space and I am connected to my Cricut Explore Air 2. The first thing I'm going to do is go over to the left panel and grab a square and a circle, and I'll move the circle out of the way. I don't need it just yet. I'm going to change the size of the square by unlocking the proportions. I'm changing the width to 7 and the height to 72. And what I'm going to do is kind of decrease the view on my screen. I had to bring it all the way down to 10% just so I could see the full rectangle. I'm not going to keep it at that size, but you'll notice that for a lot of this tutorial, I did have to decrease the view. I changed the color of the rectangle to white, and I changed the background color of the canvas to gray. Next, I went and grabbed my text. The text that I'm using is one that's called BFC Sprouts, and it is a font that I downloaded from the designbundles.net website. I'll make sure it is linked below the video. The next thing I did was I made sure that my caps lock was on, and I typed the word welcome. I just typed each letter and then I clicked the enter key so that the letters would be vertically stacked. Next, I used that circle at the top and I duplicated it and moved one out of the way. This first circle will represent the space for making the sign interchangeable. The size of the circles that I purchased from Hobby Lobby are 6.5 inches. So I'm going to resize this, keeping the proportions locked, to 6.5 in width, which will automatically change the height. Okay, and I'm going to make sure that the circle is centered on the rectangle. So I'm going to click on it and center it. Next, I duplicated the word welcome, and I'm going to start to move it over and make sure that it fits nicely on the rectangle. First, I'm going to attach the text, and that will give me a lot more freedom as I am adjusting the size of the text. So I'll grab that corner at the top, and then I'll just start to maneuver the text so that it fits all the way down the board. So here you'll see that I'm resizing the view and I'm bringing the text down. I'm going to make sure that it fits nicely along the board all the way from the top to the bottom. The next thing I did was select the text and the circle at the top, and I attached it so that it's all one thing. I made sure that the text and the circle at the top were centered on the rectangle, and I just turned that extra welcome piece off. I didn't need it. Now I'm going to start to work with that extra circle that I moved over to the side. What I'm going to do is duplicate it once and move one to the left. I'm going to duplicate it again and move another one to the right. So now you'll see I have 3 circles, one at the left, one at the top, and one on the right. I'm going to take the one on the right and duplicate it again, and then I'll select both circles and align and center them. So again, I have 2 circles over here on the right, and I have 1 circle over on the left and 1 circle at the top. The next thing I'm going to do is duplicate that second set of circles. And I'm just going to use my arrow key on my keyboard to move them over. So I have a set of 2 circles right there, and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'll have another set of 2 circles and move them over with my arrow key and duplicate it again until I have 4 sets of 2 circles on the right. The one at the top is going to be placed at the top of the board basically as a placeholder. And then once I have it in place and I have it centered, you could even attach it to your top circle if you're going to follow this process. This part is completely optional. I just have that there because I know that I want to make my sign interchangeable. The next thing I'm going to do is duplicate the circles on the left. So I have 4 sets of individual circles on the left, and I have 4 sets of double circles on the right. What I'm going to do now is add those circles in between the letters. So I'm going to start with the left, grab 1 circle and move it between the circle and the W. So you can see I have a circle and I have a W. I'm going to select 1 set of double circles and put it below the W. I'll grab 1 individual circle from the left and then a set of double circles from the right. And I'll continue this pattern until I get all the way to the bottom of the sign. Once again, 1 from the left, 2 from the right, 1 from the left, and 2 from the right. Now, I did not have a set of circles below the E at the bottom, but if you want to do that, of course, that is your personal preference. I didn't feel like I needed to because there was enough of the spacers in between each of the letters for this to work just fine. Now I am going to slow this part down a little bit because I want to make sure it's easy to understand what I'm doing right here. Before I start to really work with the text, I will need to ungroup the text and make sure that none of it is attached. Now it's important to be very careful right here because I don't have the luxury of having everything attached, so it's easy to get things out of place. Make sure everything is centered before you get to this part. What I've done is select the circle at the top. I've selected the circle in the middle and the W and the circle that's below the W. I am going to attach those pieces and then I'll move them out of the way. So I have the first circle, the big circle, the circle in the middle, the W, and the circle below, and I will click attach and I'll move it out of the way. Now with that layer moved out of the way, you'll notice that I still have the circle that was at the bottom of the E. So I have that first circle, the E, the circle that's in between the E and the L, and the circle that is below the L. With those selected, I will click attach and I'll move that out of the way. I'll continue this same process. I'll select the circle at the top, the C, the circle in between the C and the O, and then the circle below the O, and I will attach those and move it out of the way, and I will select everything that's left over. The circle at the top, the M, the circle in the middle, and the E, and I will click attach. So now I have all of the layers of my text selected. Now this next part will be optional because I will be using this part to add in the images that I want to use interchangeably. Now, these are just 3 of the images that I found that I like. Of course, I'll add more, but for now, I just wanted to demonstrate this process. You can feel free to skip this part if you don't plan to add any images to your welcome sign. So this first image just says Welcome Spring. I found it on the Creative Fabrica website. I brought the image in, and remember the space that I have is 6.5 inches in width. So I'm bringing the image down and making sure that it will fit on that circle. Once I determine the size that I need, I'll grab a circle from the left panel and then I will add my image to the top. If you are a Cricut Access subscriber, of course, you can use the Create Sticker option, or if you're not, you can always just add your image to the circle shape and flatten it and allow your Cricut to cut it after it has been printed. Okay, so I'm just changing the size of this circle to 6.5. I'll change the color of it to white. I'll move the image to the front of the circle, and then I'll make sure it's centered. I'll do this for all of the images that I plan to use, and then I will get ready to get my mats prepared. Okay, so I'm just duplicating the circles here because I'm just going to print 3 pictures. And once I'm finished with this part, I will go to the next screen, which is the prepare screen. Right here, I am moving the vinyl on the mat so I can make sure that I'm making the best use of the space. I don't think I need 3 12 by 24 mats, so I'll move this layer to that second mat. And even though it looks like it won't fit, I'll just rotate it so that it does, and I can just use 2 12 by 24 inch mats, and then I can get my images printed. I'll choose the premium vinyl setting for the vinyl, and I will use the printable vinyl setting for the images. Everything I'll do from here will be back on the camera. Vinyl that I'm using was purchased from Hobby Lobby, and it was $5, and I thought, why not give it a try? Of course, I would have loved to use StarCraft adhesive vinyl, but I didn't have enough of it in matte, and I didn't have enough to do like all of the vinyl in one matte or glossy, so I just went with this. and I'll let you know if it holds up to the weather. So right now I'm just preparing the mats. I will get the vinyl cut out. Once again, I'm using the premium vinyl setting. If you have been with me for a while, you know that when I use my Cricut Explore Air 2, I like to keep my dial set to custom. That way I can choose the material setting that works best for my project. I'll get this cut out and we'll move on to the next step. My vinyl is cut. I got my images printed. This is my regular inkjet printer. Now that I have my images, let me show you how I'm going to use the transparent vinyl. I like to use Oracle. I call it Oracle. Some people call it Oracle. I call it Oracle. What I have done is cut a piece that will fit inside the registration lines. I do not cover the registration lines. I'll show you two ways to do this. This is not my preferred method, but I've been asked a lot of times why I don't just put the transparent vinyl on top and let the Cricut cut both layers at the same time. Some people must have a magic Cricut because theirs cuts effortlessly. I don't have a magic Cricut, and I'll show you that my vinyl is going to have to go through multiple cuts just to cut a circle. But I wanted to demonstrate this process so I wouldn't keep answering the question, why didn't you just put the transparent vinyl on top? So here I am struggling to get the vinyl placed down without any air bubbles, and I wasn't successful. Just side note in case you wanted to know that. Now I will insert the mat into the machine, and I chose the premium vinyl with heavy pressure setting for this. Maybe the cut setting is wrong, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter because I won't be using it this way in the future. I just wanted to demonstrate that this is one option. So right now the Cricut is looking to read the registration lines, and it is going to cut a circle. However, it is not going to cut it deep enough for me to peel it away. So I had to end up pressing the flashing C, or pressing the C. I think I had to go through 5 cuts to get it to successfully cut through the Oracle transparent plus the printable vinyl. It finally cut all the way through after the 5th time. And what I'm going to do now is show you how I plan to add the sticker to one of those circles that I purchased from Hobby Lobby. Remember, these are 6.5 inches. And what I'm going to do is just peel the sticker away and center it as good as I can. Once I have it down, I'll show you the way that I prefer to cut the Oracle transparent. What I did was went back into Cricut Design Space, and I just had it to cut 2 circles that were 6.5 inches wide. And I have the Oracle transparent on the mat, and you'll see my Cricut will cut this with one pass with no problem. Once I have the vinyl cut out, the next thing I did was just remove the mat from the machine. I added the image to the circle, and then I put the Oracle transparent right on top with no problem whatsoever. No bubbles, no problems. Here's the image. I'm going to actually put the image face down and then put the circle right there on top. And then I remove the Orcal transparent from the backing. I put that face up with the sticky side facing up, and I just put the image face down right there on top. No bubbles, no hassle, no problem, no nothing. What I'm doing right here is just double checking the vinyl. I laid it all out to make sure it's going to fit exactly how I want it to fit on the board. And now that I have it, what I'll do is cut one piece of transfer tape that I plan to use for this full board. And even after this, if it's still good enough, I'm going to make sure it's long enough to cover each of the letters. And then once I have the transfer tape, I'll start weeding the excess vinyl away so that all I'm left with is the letters and the dots. Now I'm weeding the vinyl, and once I finished, I will double check the placement of that first circle, and this will help me as I'm going all the way down the board. Now that large circle that's above the W is only there as a placeholder, because what is going to be behind that is one of the wooden circles from Hobby Lobby. What I've done is add glue to the back of the circle, and I will place it behind the vinyl and make sure it's adhered to the wood board. Once I have that in place, I'm kind of just pressing it just a little bit. I didn't even have to press it long. I actually use Maker's Magic for that. What I'll do now is grab a smaller piece of transfer tape and transfer the dot that's above the W itself, and the dot below the W. Okay, so I have the vinyl is I did okay with applying it or transferring it to the transfer tape. And what I'm going to do now is use those dots as centers on the board, and I will burnish it down and make sure it's really applied to the wood. And then I'll move on and continue the same process for every two letters and the corresponding dots. I have the E and the L weeded, and what I'm going to do is just add it to the transfer tape, make sure that it's adhered to the transfer tape, and use the dots to line it up. See the dot above the E? It lined up perfectly. I'm burnishing it down, and then I'm going to continue with the C and the O. This process honestly was easier than I could have even imagined. Having those dots right there was very, very helpful. So I'm going to just burnish it down to the transfer tape, make sure that it's adhered, turn it over, get it removed from the backing, and use those dots to line it up. My sign is completely centered. I love it already, and I'm not even finished with it yet. So that's the last of the letters. Now, I really thought that using Maker's Magic would work, but it didn't. So I have Maker's Magic, some of it on the back of the Velcro dot, and it just wasn't strong enough. I don't know if it's because I didn't let it sit long enough. I think I was too anxious to get this placed on my porch, but it ended up not working. So I tried it first with the Maker's Magic, and I kind of pressed down. I even sat the wood under my Cricut lamp because there is some weight to it, but that just didn't work. So what I ended up doing was using hot glue instead, and that seemed to work a lot better. We're at the final stretch. Hopefully you have found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please remember to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell for notifications because I do upload new content every single week. So now this is me just showing you what it looks like on my porch. I'm changing out the signs. Don't pay attention to the mat. I'm going to have to put a new mat out there. I'll do that in due time. But right now, this is how my sign turned out. And yes, I love it. I absolutely love the way this turned out. The sign that's hanging on my door, my son made that with the We Create. He didn't love it, but I did. And one man's trash is another man's treasure. Hopefully you found it helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.